quicker. I'm used to working with natural, and this
So the heat shield that you added down here, Dave, is for meltdown to prevent the valve from getting too hot.
from melting. Stick handle on the valve.
Last time you let it sit for about 10 minutes.
It's very easy to do.
Temperature went down to about 132.
Everybody that has used one of these systems at one time or another seems to melt one just to prove the fact that
When you get down there,
they can do it. I have no other reason.
Once you do it once, you don't do it again, though.
That's right. Sitting there till they cool it off.
Oh, by the way, Bob, it's really greasy if you grab it. Thanks a hell of a lot. That's great.
Right now we'll be recirculating.
How many pounds are you starting off with, Dave?
So we're going to make 20 gallons. You want to try to stretch it to 25. I've never done that. Hey, why don't we make a 25-gallon batch, Mike?
That's an interesting question.
That's the maximum?
What if you use, what if you use, I'm grinding the grain right now through the roller mill.
We're not grinding the grain. What you just want to do is you want to take and crush the kernel. So just the inside, or you don't want to break up the husk. You just want the inside to be exposed. You notice a lot of the whole husks of the grain here
And then as you poured it into your,
are intact. That's what you want. You want to leave the husk pretty much intact. You just break the thing open so that the white inner part of the grain is exposed, and you want to leave the husk as
so you gotta make sure you
one
give it a
as
real
big a piece as possible.
Okay.
Now the other thing that
The whole
I
is
did
the
a few
husk.
weeks ago
Right.
is that
You just crack the husk open,
Yep.
exposing the starch.
Yep.
was going to make.
That's all you want to do.
Mike.
Okay, we're a little bit ahead of Dave right here. We've actually heated the spark, we heated the strike water up. We heated it to about 142 degrees, 148.
Strike temperature?
Yeah.
About 141, 142.
Okay, the water was about 142 degrees when we put the grain in. Here we've added 17 pounds of the Irex Pilsner malt, 5 pounds of the check my notes here, the Munich malt, and 5 pounds of the American two-row, which was made by Breeze. We added that to about 7.5 or 8 gallons of water that we had in the kettle. Inside the kettle we have a fairly thick mash. We've got 8 pounds of or 8 gallons of water and the grain that I mentioned before, which was 27 pounds of grain. And it's a fairly thick mash. Okay, we can move it around. We may need to add a little bit more water to this, and that's why we've got water in the hot water kettle as well.
What kind of consistency are you looking for?
You're looking for a thick oatmeal. This is actually a little too thick right here. So we need to rack off a little bit of the water from this kettle and pour it into here. Water out of the kettle to get the consistency that you want.
If you add too much water, what is your result?
Too much water really doesn't hurt anything. It kind of spreads the enzymes out a little bit more, and it may take a little longer to convert. But some breweries actually use a very thin mash, and the reason they do is they actually pump from a mash kettle to a lauter kettle, a separate kettle that has a screen in it. And that's the way some breweries do it. So they actually run with quite a thin mash. I would suspect that it would take a little bit longer for it to convert. Okay, here we see just a little bit of moisture on top now, and that's about right. Just a little bit of water so that there's a little bit of moisture on top. That's the way I like to see it. There are some people that will use gallons of water to pounds of grain, but it takes too much time to stop and think about. So We just put a little bit of water in so it looks a little moist on top.
What is that little hook inside that's in the grain?
This right here?
Yes.
Okay, this is our, will be our sparge head when we're sparging, but we're going to use this to recirculate the wort from the bottom of the kettle to the top of the kettle. That's especially important when we're heating the kettle, because we're
Okay.
trying to raise the temperature. Right now well, the temperature actually went up a couple degrees. It's about 145 in there. 155 degrees, we let it set there for 30 minutes, and then 158. We don't have ultra accurate control of our temperatures, so we shoot for something.
Well, right now I'm going to demonstrate the way of adding the grain to the hot water, and it's called striking. And the same striking, and what I will demonstrate here, my method of doing it works quite well. I start out with the Pilsner grain, on about 130-degree rest temperature. I put about an inch of water over the top of the screen.
About an inch of water now is over the top of that screen.
It's about an inch of water over the screen at 145 degrees.
And this is the striking temperature.
Yes.
This is, so now we're ready to add our grain.
Okay. When you add the grain, you have to be quite careful not to get a dry ball of grain in there. You want to make sure it mixes thoroughly with the water. 5 gallons. It's real easy to end up with like a wad of dry grain in the middle of your mash. So when your initial mixing is when you
The other way of doing that is just to add some mineral salt.
make sure that doesn't happen. I'm adding some more 145-degree water to it right now. I prefer my mash a little bit on the looser side than a lot of people, but
Kind of a loose oatmeal consistency.
kind of a loose oatmeal consistency. The important thing is to make sure you get all the, you don't have the dough it in real nice, and you don't end up with any, like I say, dry spots, because then the starch won't convert.
You need a thorough mix.
Right. And what's funny about it is it really won't soak in. It takes quite a while for it to soak in. Here I'm adding these 3-gallon boilers that I used to use on my stovetop when I was a stovetop brewer come in handy for adding the grain. So any equipment that you had prior to the usage of this system, or a similar system, is not necessarily wasted. It's quite handy. This is probably a little looser than I like it, but
As it soaks in, will it thicken?
yes. Depends on how much water you add. But I find that I get quite a good extract. I get quite a good amount of sugar extract from my grain with a loose mash. So and I don't have any trouble with it being stuck. A lot of people like it. A lot of people like it much more. That's a matter of preference. My suggestion is to try it either way, and as long as your grain is wet, the water will circulate through it. You're all set. That's the important thing. I'm adding the rest of the grain here to the mash. We're going to try to get 40 pounds of grain into the mash kettle here, and that's about the max that you can do.
40 pounds for a 25-gallon batch?
25-gallon batch, okay, which is about the maximum for this system. You could probably squeeze a 30 out of it, but the gravity would probably end up around in the low 1040s. I'm shooting for a 1050 gravity on a 25-gallon batch. And you can do that with about 40 pounds of 2-roll Pilsner malt.
And the recipe we are doing here is a dark continental.
No, Continental Dark is over at the other brewery. This is going to be a Pilsner similar to like a Pilsner Urel.
Okay. Now, as you add the grain, Dave, does it make a difference that the grain that you first added has been sitting longer than the grain that's been added at the end?
It probably won't affect it too terribly much. The thing is, you want your the first part of your conversion to last about 10 to 20 minutes and get about 120 to 130 degree range. I shoot for 130, and if it cools off a little bit along the way, it comes out just fine.
You never turn your burners back on then during this process?
Yes, when I'm gonna start the water. Once the protein rest is over here, I'm gonna turn the circulation pump on in the burner and circulate the mash as I'm warming it.
Is that, okay,
Making sure that the bottom thermometer doesn't go over 165 degrees. Usually when you shut the heat off, it'll climb a couple after that, so I usually kill the heat at about 162, 163 degrees.
and then that's the protein rest?
And then we're going to, yeah, the first step is the protein rest, 120 degree. Now this mash is a little thicker than I usually make it, but as you can see, this is a little thicker than I usually make it, but like I say, we're right up to about the max end of the system here. 40 pounds of grain is about it.
So if you were to put more grain in there and not enough room for it, then you
Make a mess.
make a mess.
Try it. We're gonna, as most brewers know, that brewing messes are quite a common phenomenon, and what we should do here is probably somewhere on the tape here demonstrate a good boil over, so everybody can know what they're in store for.
But we don't want to do a thermometer flare or meltdown.
Thermometer meltdown when the thermometer starts to brown inside the spacer on plastic face.
Just go get that. Tear it out of the wall. Tear it out of the wall.
That's very sophisticated.
That's about it right here. We're just gonna
I'm talking about your handheld.
we're gonna put the lid on it and let her set.
We do have a thoroughly mixed mash now.
At this point, nothing has to be sterile. It's only at about the last 10 minutes of boil you have to worry. Actually, this grain is if you took and you put a handful of grain in your mash or in your fermenter, it would spoil it. There's a terrible amount of bacteria in grain, but at this point it doesn't matter because we're going to boil it in all the.
So sanitation is not a concern at this point.
No, sanitation is not a concern until the last 10 minutes of boil.
Okay.
At that point, when we get the circulation pump, you'll see that what we do is circulate the boiling water through the pump to sterilize the pump at the end of the boil, and make sure that after that we can use the pump to fill the carboys, and everything is clean at that point.
Good.
So when we install the
What's it say?
hose here, the first step is to take the plastic
For distilled water use.
off
It's not,
Prepared by deionization. It's
front of
not
it.
distilled.
for
Probably don't need to take too much
It's
of this.
used in the same applications
Catch this in a second here.
as distilled.
So when you're using yours for the first time, you have to remove this piece of plastic on your sparge.
I've got the plastic removed. I'm going to put it through the hole in my lid.
you may want to,
Set the sparge head. Set the sparge head right on top of the mash.
clear right now.
Install the lid.
How can you tell?
The female pump fitting goes on the inlet. On the outlet, the male pump fitting goes, and you install a Teflon tape.
So what you need to do, this should have mixed fairly well.
Install the
I mean,
pump.
By putting the water over top of this
So
thing
that the
and kind of letting it soak through, it should.
the outlet is the highest point.
It's always good to stir this to make sure.
What do you mean by the highest point?
You want all the air to get out of the pumps,
Right.
or else the pump will cavitate. What cavitating is, the pump will just sit there and run and nothing will happen.
2/3 of the way down.
And it's not very good for the pump.
So you don't have to prime the pump then?
No, you shouldn't have to prime the
And work
pump.
it down easy.
It should be gravity fed. The important thing to
2/3 of the way down.
this pump
Work it
system is
down
to make
easy.
sure all the connections are tight. If you've got any pinholes in them, you generally
Really
have
nothing
trouble.
can hurt it at this point, except.
Now you're putting the pump on top?
Right. You want to
Yeah.
keep
And
your
just kind of get,
protection so the cord doesn't get melted.
you can run down most of the way.
Very important part here.
Very important part. And then turn it on and plug it in.
Yeah, turn it down before you plug it in.
Turn it on before you plug it in.
Your switch is on too.
And as you can see, it's circulating. You try not to want to aerate this as much. You want to keep it under the head underneath the water. You don't want to reduce the hot side aeration. And you seal off any outlet. These things tend to cool off quick. If you seal it up with a piece of just aluminum foil, works real well. If you have the system with the later system with the notch in it, you can cover the system up with the foil.
Okay. What? We've already let this. We've gone. This went through the protein rest.
Yes. It should be about should be at about 120 to 130 degrees here. Then we want to do
Two screens come together past the bar.
because we want to light the burner.
I actually push down
About 10 to 20 minutes in the protein rest stage is fine.
And so right now our mash has been about 10 to somewhere between 10 and 20 minute resting.
You want to take the flame deflector. Anytime you're heating grain, you want the flame deflector over the top of the flame. It's a little square unit on the burner, so the flame is deflected, heating one particular spot. You want to watch your bottom temperature, and when it gets up to about 160 degrees, you want to kill your heat. You don't want your heat on very violent at this point either. You just want to keep it on nice and low. And what you want to do is you want to raise the temperature of the grain up to your mash temperature. You want about 149 degrees for a real dry beer. Real sweet beer, 152 to 154. Actually, that's a medium sweet. Real sweet beer, 158 to 160. So the amount of dextrose you produce, which is not fermentable, is directly proportional to the temperature that you do the next step.
Okay. So now you're raising the temperature to 160.
We want to. This I like it just fairly in the dry. I like my pilsners on the dry side, and I prevent them at low temperature, so the yeast tends to be a little bit sluggish. So I like to do it at 150, about 150 degrees is the temperature I like to use.
And how long will you? Once it gets to that temperature, you cut your flame.
Right. And you want to circulate until all your thermometers are constant.
Okay, at that 150 or whatever temperature you decide to
Periodically, every 5 minutes or so, you should stir the thing up. Make sure all the enzymes and everything is circulating.
By turning the pump off and physically stirring it up, then.
Right. Well, you can leave the pump on. Just be sure that the hose is clipped on so it doesn't fly out and squirt you. You can do it either way.
Okay.
We're just adding the last bit of grain here to the kettle. Ending up with a nice thick mash.
This is what type of grain did you just add now, Dave?
Okay, with a Pilsner malt, you would use a strike temperature of the water, about 145, so it ends up about 130. And you want I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. This is all fun.
Anyway, ready to go here and start the pump. And with a little luck, the pump will start. Something was flowing without the pump on.
From the gravity.
That's the way it's supposed to be. Off the record.
Yes. And now we're sparging again.
Circulating the water.
Circulating to strike.
Yes. And we want to get the temperature stabilized. We got to get a second thermometer here so we can do that.
Okay, one coming
Need a lighter.
right there by your foot, unless they moved it.
Out of the way. Here I have a nice flow of liquid.
Now we sit back and bring it up to our.
You want to heat it up until the bottom thermometer is somewhere around 160, then kill the heat. And keep circulating until our thermometer is stabilized at 150 degrees.
And once it's stabilized, we leave it set. Then again.
I'm going to maintain circulation on it until it gets conversion. Oh, you don't have to circulate it, that's not necessary once you get that stabilized. The circulator just gets more clarified and the enzymes get a chance to work through the mash.
Okay. Now it's time to have a home brew.
Right, it's time to have a home brew.
Here we have well, it's almost.
Near boil over, about as near as you're going to get.
Oh, it's gone down. We caught it just in time. Our brew. Time to ferment.
Probably great just to...
We'll probably cool off by the time we get to what you want, dude. That's probably enough. I wanted to get the screens out of here.
Pardon me?
Screens out of here.
You done sparging yet?
Well, I'm done starting, you know,
Yeah. You got to finish sparging. Yeah, just pump it now.
David? Michael?
Yes, sir.
Are we sparging until it comes out clear on the top kegs there?
We're sparging to probably select, if we're making 25 gallons of beer in the second batch, we're going to sparge to about 30 gallons, or more than 30 gallons.
Okay.
Because you'll have so much of it that it boils off. Just give me a hard time, David.
Sure they work.
Uh-huh.
Dave is sitting in the screens.
Those are special hop screens that are going in there.
He just inserted his
Big
copper
hole.
hot screens to collect the hops, so when we ferment, the hops won't go into the fermenter.
really upsets me that I have to look at this and not take any sip out of it. You know, I got to wait 2 weeks.
Minimum.
This is real hell. Do you realize that after all this work, after 5.5 hours or however long it took us to do all this, we're not done yet. I got two more weeks to sit and look at this stuff before I can take my first taste out of it.
You guys only have a 25 gallons of beer, though.
Yeah, but needless to say, it always pays to have made a prior batch so that you got something to sip on, like you guys.
This is 10 weeks old here.
All right, I think we're ready for the next one. That one?
The fun part. Fill in the fermenters. So you heard it first. 2 weeks, we'll be drinking this fine beer.
Oh, they're going to need
Problem
2
is,
weeks.
when you get down that far, you can't shut it off and expect it to start again. Opposed to getting it,
We'll put it in one of these.
yeah. Dave and I fermented one of these last year.
Really?
One of those plastic
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't even change the top. We didn't put an airlock on it or anything.
Nothing, just put it in and ferment it.
These things, I put them in my sink in the basement, okay? They blew up, they look like that.
Yeah, I've got a boil here, and a demonstrated near boil over. First start to boil, it's real unpredictable.
And once you see your boil, you lower your temperature.